Texas A&M lost their first big recruiting battle so far this summer, and so what's next? We'll talk about it here on Locked On Aggies.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in. You are Locked On the Texas A&M Aggies. My name is Matt Galatzan, and I will be your host. And today I am joined by my recruiting expert over there on Texas A&M Aggies on SI, Harrison Reno. Harrison, Texas A&M dropped they've been on fire, and it was only a matter of time before they lost a big-time battle with one of these powers in the SEC. You know, that happened today as we record this about 2 hours ago. Five-star offensive lineman / defensive lineman / athlete / all everything. Lamar Brown, he committed to the LSU Tigers. It's a big loss for the Aggies. There's no way around it. He's an elite talent, and it's kind of hard to not be upset about that one. But they've been cleaning up so far. There's a lot still on the table for them. What are you hearing right now that's coming next down the pipe for Texas A&M that Aggie fans can look forward to?
I think there's still obviously, you're going to win some, you lose some. That's just the nature of it. I think everyone's, in recruiting talks about, you never really know until the announcement's made or the paper signed. And I think that kind of was the case here. You didn't really know. But in terms of kind of what's next, I think A&M might be done in terms of defensive line for right now. You already got Jermaine Kinsler. Bryce Perry-Wright was a more recent addition. Tristan Givens, Jordan Carter. You got the kid from California, Samu. Like, I don't think they're desperate in terms like, hey, obviously Lamar's a with, but we weren't like, hey, we're counting on it. He's our guy. Like, number one, all in to get him. I think they're done there. But where I do think they're going to start adding people is at the defensive back. You already got Brandon Arrington earlier to start the month, or actually last month. You added Cameron Hamill from Arizona. You have Victor Singleton, which came from April. I don't think they're quite done there yet. You got 3 corners in the class. They also added the safety in Collins. There's 2 more safeties outstanding right now on the board in Dylan Wilson, Tamarian Watkins, who both, I believe, are set to be making a decision here in the coming days. I know Watkins is set for July 14th. And that, Matt, from all indications, seems to be it's down to Texas A&M and South Carolina for the most part right now. It seems like those 2 are the big contenders.
Yeah, and it feels like Texas A&M is in a good spot there, and it also feels like they're in a good spot for Tylen Wilson right now. I do expect. I think you're right. I think they're probably done along the defensive line for right now. Lamar Brown was obviously a take if he commits to Texas A&M. If he doesn't, you're still sitting real good in that area. And the recruitment's probably not over either. I would imagine that Texas A&M is still going to push hard for that. Commitments in July don't really mean anything in terms of finality. We've seen plenty of times in years past, as recently as last year, a guy commits in the summer, and then come December or whatever, he's flipped over to another team, or because a new NIL deal comes through, or this happens or that happens. There's a shift in the recruiting class, whatever the case may be. I mean, just last month with the Texas Longhorns and Oregon Ducks, Richard Wesley, 5-star edge rusher, was committed to Oregon, jumped in a pool with Dan Lanning, and then a month later he's committing to Texas and shutting down his recruitment. So these things change all the time. And that they'll have a couple more battles here coming up. Lamar Brown's going to be one that they stay on, I think. And Tristan Keys, the wide receiver who's also committed to LSU, is probably going to be one of those 2.
Yeah, I think obviously the big date in terms like landmark date is obviously going to be early signing day for those guys. But also August 1st is the first day where seniors in high school can sign actual paperwork in terms of a revenue sharing agreement with their schools. So whatever promises were made to these recruits, August 1st is kind of going to be the day. Hey, who's making false promises? Who's going to keep their word? So just keep an eye out in terms of that. August 1st should be a interesting day to say the least around college football and over the next few months in terms of after that. I mean, they're what, ranked the third class in the nation, only behind USC and Georgia. And for a while there, it was USC and Texas A&M who were just lighting the world on fire. I mean, from the very beginning in this cycle. And I don't, like you said, the race for this number one class is not over. There is a long way to go until December, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, there's still plenty of guys left on the board. Braylon Womack, Lamar Brown is still going to be a battle. Tristan Keys is going to be a battle. We mentioned the two defensive backs earlier on in the show that they're still in for those guys as well. You talk about Jace Matthews, wide receiver. So there's plenty left for A&M to do here, including continuing after Lamar Brown going forward. But just quickly before we change gears here, what do you think Texas A&M, if Lamar Brown sticks with LSU, what do you think Texas A&M is going to be missing in this prospect? Because a lot of people don't know that much about him in the sense that, they hear he's an athlete and he plays offensive line and defensive line. But what is it that makes him so good, Harrison?
I think it is the fact that he is two-way. Like, we say two-way now, and it's like, what, they talk about it in baseball a lot, a two-way talent or something like that. Now you hear it in football after Travis Hunter. I think that's what makes him so special is when you look at these evaluators who know a lot more than I do in terms of scouting and football talent. They say, hey, this guy projects as a starter, a Division I, an SEC starter on offensive line and on the defensive line. Like that's rare. I don't know how many guys have plus grades, maybe double plus grades in terms of, hey, they can go play both ways and be effective at it. Now, obviously, I don't think if you're going to go both ways, you probably aren't going to be playing offensive line and defensive line. I don't imagine so. But I do think that's truly what makes him special. And from what it sounded like A&M had a higher grade on him for defense on the defensive line than they did maybe on the offensive line.
Yeah, and I think that if he gets his choice, he's going to start off on the defensive line. Obviously, that will depend on what LSU wants to do with him. I'm sure that he had that conversation and said, "I want to start here," and then we'll see where it goes from there. I'm sure there's a lot of other conversations that happened over there in Baton Rouge as well. But LSU is also a team that is very hot on the recruiting trail. So losing a battle for one guy to your rival in the SEC is not the end of the world. There's still plenty left for Texas A&M to do. And we'll see what happens. I'm still very confident that this class is going to end up in a pretty good spot. It's going to stay there in the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, somewhere in there. There is still a path to the number one class. It's a little bit more difficult now, but it is still there. So we'll keep an eye out for that. Coming up next, though, we're going to talk about, we're getting close to the football season. We're only about a month and a half away. We're going to talk about some best case scenarios and worst case scenarios for Texas A&M coming up, and kind of get into what the Aggies need to do to be successful next fall. So stick with us. We'll come back after the break and get into all that. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action. FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel always makes it feel like I'm a part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Harrison, we are back from the break, and it is time to talk a little Texas A&M football. We talked some recruiting here in the first segment. SEC Media Days are coming up next week, and then not too long after that, the season starts, and we're going to get a taste of what Mike Elko has been able to do in his first full, spring and first full season, first full spring. And we're getting into the summer. He's finally got his feet under him. He's cleaning up on the recruiting trail. Now it's time to see what he has improved off of a team last year that started super hot, started 7-1, finished kind of slow, dropped the 3 of their last 4, in the SEC, and then also dropping that bowl game to USC. I don't really put too much stock in the bowl game stuff. I think that if you're not in the college football playoff, you don't really have too much motivation to go play in the Las Vegas Bowl. So I don't put too much stock into that one. But the end of the season was rough for Texas A&M. And, despite that, they were still in position to play for an SEC championship. They had to beat Texas, which was a tall ask. That game did not go their way. This season, it seems like they have an opportunity to really make some noise in the SEC. So what I want to ask you is, and I'll respond with mine after you go first, what is the best case scenario for Texas A&M in a realistic sense? We're not talking obviously the best case scenario is, 12-0 regular season all the way to a national championship. Best, realistic best case scenario for the Aggies next fall.
I think it's 10-2. When I look at the schedule, some of their hardest games come at home, which I think is a big advantage. I think in today's world of college football, where I don't know if we'll ever really have parity in terms like every team can beat anybody at a given time, like you can in the NFL maybe. But I do think you're starting to see, traditionally these lower tier SEC teams start to close the gap a little bit on the upper tier. And when I look at the schedule, you talk about hardest games, you talk about going at LSU. Anytime you have to go to Death Valley, that's going to be tough. Obviously, to open the year, third game of the year, you're going on the road to Notre Dame. Matt, I know they were coming off of a national championship appearance. Me personally, I'm not putting much stock into Notre Dame. I think at least this year, I think A&M should be able to go in there and pull out that win. But in terms of 10-2, I think that's a really best case scenario because I'm not sure if we're going to see undefeated teams as much in college football these days, especially within the SEC. I think they're going to be beating up on each other a little bit. I think you're going to lose a game that maybe you shouldn't, not like a Vanderbilt upset beating Alabama type, but like, hey, you might go on the road and lose to Arkansas in a rivalry game because it's, there's emotional. You're going to ride the waves a little bit. You talk about there's a 3-game stretch right there, Matt, where you're at home versus Florida, who I think is kind of a super position to A&M where it's like, I think people could be overlooking them. And hey, you get that win at home, then you have to go and play at Arkansas. You might slip up there. Then you have another potentially emotion-filled game at LSU. That's a 3-game stretch there where it's very possible that's where they get their first or maybe even second loss, depending on how the schedule plays out. I think if I'm having to put money on it, I'm saying their 2 losses come on the road, maybe at LSU and at Texas. And I think that's probably the best case scenario, realistic best case scenario.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Mine is, they start off the season hot. They beat Notre Dame, and by the time they get to the LSU game, they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're 7-0 heading into Death Valley, and then depending on what happens in that game, you got Missouri, you got South Carolina, Samford, and Texas. So, yeah, my best case scenario is they start the season 7-0. They drop one in Baton Rouge. They win their next 3. They're in position once again to make it to the SEC championship in a game against Texas. And I just, it's really hard to bet against Texas. It doesn't matter who you are right now. I know Aggie fans don't want to hear that, but they're just a really damn good football team. So it's hard to argue against it. So, mine's 10-2 in a college football playoff berth. And I think that in that scenario, depending on who they get matched up against, I think they can win a college football playoff game and get themselves into a position to, maybe even host a college football playoff game like Texas did last year, and get a win and go into the quarterfinals and have a chance to move forward there. So I think that's an absolutely realistic outcome for Texas A&M, and I'm honestly I'm getting a little tired of the doubts surrounding this team because I think all they did was get better off of a team that competed for an SEC championship last year. And obviously, in my scenario, they figure out their late season woes that have crushed them so much over the last couple of years. So I think we're on the same page there. Now let's get into the worst case scenario. And this is obviously a little bit more nuanced because there's a lot of different things that can be worst case, right? We can have, a 5-7 season because you got a really tough schedule, or we can just have, the typical 8-4, here we go again, Aggie season that a lot of the fans are sort of tired of and have been very vocal that they're tired about. So we're going to go you first here once again. What is the worst case scenario for you for the Aggies in a realistic sense?
I don't want to say 8-4. I would like to be a little bit different, but that does feel very plausible in terms of you look at the games where they're probably going to be underdogs in. I mean, right off the bat, we'll start there with Texas at the end of the year. You're going to DKR the first time in over a decade that game's going to be played there. Say what you want about that place. There's one thing that can't be mistaken. They're going to be ready to play. Both sides are going to be ready to play. That atmosphere is going to be ready to bring it. Texas is likely going to be favored in that game. I don't know. I would say probably a touchdown favorite, depending on where things are in the year at that point. I don't think they pull that out. In terms of getting to the other 3 losses, again, LSU, Death Valley, tough game, tough place to play. I have them losing that one as well. And then you get to a couple home games. I really like Florida. I really do. I think they bring back 4 of their 5 returning offensive linemen. I think DJ Lagway is a guy that everyone's buying into as a quarterback. You could easily lose that game. If they're as good as people say they are and as good as this preview magazine is right to my left says they are, then they could come out of there with a win. And then the last one, South Carolina. Lenore Sellers and Kyle Field. That one's going to be a nice matchup. I'm excited to watch that game. That game was interesting last year. Again, another game where even though you're at home, even though Kyle Field's going to be ready and amped for that, I think that's probably another night game maybe. You could definitely see South Carolina pulling out a win there. And I think that's kind of where the worst case scenario comes in is you lose 2 games at home that you would rather not lose and then lose 2 on the road.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on there. Right now, the Texas A&M spread is -10.5 for the Longhorns, so a little bigger than I expected. I think that's probably going to drop by the time you get to November next year, and it's going to be a little bit tighter there because I think both teams are going to be in good positions. But yeah, my worst case scenario is A&M hitting the 8-4 bug again as well. I just think it's the last. I think A&M fans, as crazy as this sounds, I almost think A&M fans would rather go 6-6 than 8-4 again. It just seems like that's kind of the curse number for them right now because it's been, they had the 5-7 season under Jimbo, and then they go 8-4, and then last year they go 8-4. It's like, it's just everybody's so tired of it, and they want to get over the hump. And if they don't get over the hump, even if they have good wins, the season's going to feel like a failure. The only thing that could save that is if the 8th win was Texas at DKR. I think that's the only thing that could really take that over the top for A&M fans to make that season feel like a success. But it's very easy, as easy as it is to find a path to 10-2 on this schedule. It's just as easy to find a path to 8-4. I mean, the Notre Dame game is going to be a tough one, no matter what, whether we put stock in Notre Dame or not. It's South Bend's a tough place to play. And that's a defending national championship contender at least. So, and Marcus Freeman's a really damn good coach. So you got that there. We don't know what to make out of Hugh Freeze and Auburn yet. I don't put much stock in Hugh Freeze and Auburn. I think that they're going to be trash, but
I think Auburn's a little bit too much.
Yeah, maybe he's been golfing a little too much, but he has a history of winning big games. So anything can happen there. DJ Lagway with Florida, that's going to be a tough one. Not too worried about the Arkansas game, but then you have to go to Death Valley. Missouri might be an underrated team. So there's really a lot going on there. And that's before even talking about, facing 2 of the 3 best quarterbacks in the country with Lenora Sellers and Arch Manning in 2 of your last 3 games. So 8-4 is definitely not what Aggie fans want to hear, but it is certainly a realistic scenario. And it's one that, if that happens, let's say the 8-4 thing happens, right? I don't think Texas A&M fans need to hit the panic button with Mike Elko whatsoever. I know that will probably be a prevailing narrative on the Texags message boards or, some of those places on the internet where the vocal minority kind of, raises their profile a little bit. But I think regardless of what happens, you have to take another winning season after taking over a program that was an absolute dumpster fire under Jimbo Fisher and putting back-to-back 8-win seasons together, including, you can have some high-profile wins in there. Even in an 8-4 scenario, you're beating a ranked team in there somewhere. You're probably going to have an upset or two at some point in the season. So even if we find a happy middle ground there where it's instead of 10-2 or 8-4, it's 9-3, that means you either get a win over Notre Dame, LSU, South Carolina, or Texas, and you also get one over Florida. So, there's a lot that can still happen even in that scenario, but I really like the direction that Texas A&M's on right now, Harrison.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think as quick as some people would to, want to say, hey, maybe we didn't get the right guy here in terms of Elko at 8-4. To me, it's like it depends on the 4 you lose, very much so. Because I look at the schedule, and yeah, you could say the opponents, and say it's a hard schedule, but it's made kind of exponentially more difficult by the stretch that you have to go through. I mean, the stretch that we talked about before, obviously there's a 3-game stretch of Florida, Arkansas, LSU. But I'm looking at the even bigger stretch. I mean, it starts with Florida. You go to Arkansas, to LSU, to Missouri, home versus South Carolina. Then you get a little bit of breather with Samford. I mean, if you lose 2 of those 4 games between Florida, Arkansas, LSU, Missouri, it's like if you lose 2 of those games, I don't think it's time to hit the panic button by any means, especially if you have the added context of, hey, you beat a Notre Dame on the road. Maybe you got a win versus Florida at home or something like that. By no means, I'm with you, Matt. 8-4 is not reason to start hitting the panic button, especially if you start to see some progress being made on offense. I think if Marcel Reed shows the promise that I think people expect him to, and gives you like, hey, another year in the system, another 4 years the starter, his junior year could be the year that he takes A&M to the promised land of making the college football playoff. I'm with you. I mean, it really depends on the 4 losses and I guess the overall context of how it looks. I like talking about it like Ole Miss. Ole Miss is like one of the only programs where you can go 8-4, but that fan base is happy just as long as they look good doing it.
Yeah.
So you can go 8-4 if you look good doing it.
Yeah, and as long as Ole Miss doesn't lose to Mississippi State, they're feeling pretty good over there. So,
yeah.
I mean, I like that comparison. I think that the 4 will definitely matter in that scenario. You definitely don't want one of them to be Missouri or Arkansas or one of these other less high profile. You want those games to be against the ranked teams. Those losses to be like, you don't want to lose to Mississippi State. You don't want to lose to Auburn at Kyle Field. If he avoids those things and he's competitive in these losses to ranked teams that could potentially come, if they're competitive in the majority of those games and really push those teams, and I think that also kind of leaves a good taste in Aggie fans' mouths. But we're going to change gears here again. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about who in this 2026 recruiting class that is currently ranked number 3 in the nation has the potential to have the biggest impact for Texas A&M going forward. So stick with us. We'll be back right after this break. Okay, Harrison, we are back. And Texas A&M, like we've been talking about, despite the loss of Lamar Brown, despite not having Tristan Keys on the team, on the commitment list, they're still on fire on the recruiting trail. There's going to be some guys that are coming in here shortly. Both of us believe that there are going to be some big-time gets, but also, right now, as the class stands, taking out anybody who could commit here in the next few days or the next few weeks, there is a lot of talent in this class. That's why it's ranked number 3 in the nation as it stands. It's ranked number 2 in the SEC behind Georgia, who is usually up there at number 1. So it's no shame to be behind the Georgia Bulldogs in anything right now. Out of that entire list, from top to bottom, who is your pick to have the biggest impact once they get to College Station, and why?
For me, it's Aaron Gregory, the 26th receiver out of Douglas County. Saw him in person in his playoff game, first-round playoff game they played at Douglas County this past year. And when I tell you, that guy's different. He is different. I mean, just I believe they were backed up against inside their own 5-yard line, and their play call is legit. Hey, he's down there somewhere. He's going to go get the football, and he just wins. Every time that ball was thrown his way that night, he was there on the other end of it. I think we've seen the trend, especially over the last few years, of I think the receiver position is becoming one of the more, I don't want to say easy, but positions where you can go in and make an impact as a freshman right away. I mean, and it does take, next level talent. Like you have to be a Jeremiah Smith, a Devontae Smith, a Jamar Chase, like that type of talent. I think Aaron Gregory, frankly, is one of the best receivers to come out of the state of Georgia in quite some time. Just extremely fluid of an athlete, moves well. He can beat you underneath. He can beat you over the top. 6'3", 178 or 178 pounds. I don't think there's very many concerns as to where like you can match him up. He can go play on the outside. I think he could play in the slot if you needed him to. I'm really excited to see what he looks like in a college offense. I know a lot of people talk about Colin Klein and what he can do to get creative in the run game. I'm really excited to see what he can do in the passing game when he gets a true freshman receiver like Aaron Gregory, and he has him for 3 years. I mean, this year is going to be a good preview in terms of what he can do with top talent because he has a Kevin Concepcion on the outside. Last year he had Noah Thomas, to work with on the outside. I'm really excited to see what Gregory can do in the A&M offense.
Yeah, I mean he's you say he's different, and I've seen some film of this kid, and he definitely looks different. So seeing it in person is got to be something else because there's been a couple times in the past where I've watched film of the guy. Let's say as recently as Diabell at the Elite 11 finals that I was at a couple weeks ago. I watched some tape of Diabell, the Texas commit, and I was like, yeah, he's really solid. He's going to be good. I can see why he might be a 5-star. Then you get on the field and you get to watch him up close, and you see the way that the ball pops off his hand. You see the way that he moves around and his consistency and all those different things. You're like, oh, okay, I get it. And it seems like you got that same thing with Aaron Gregory. So that's very exciting for Aggie fans to hear because there has not been, Noah Thomas was good. He transferred. He's not there anymore. There's been a couple of receivers who have shown flashes over the last couple of years. There hasn't been that dominant, at least from the top of my head. Maybe you can name one that I'm not thinking of, but there hasn't been that dominant, number one go-to superstar wide receiver in this offense for some time. So I think getting a guy that has the potential to do that would be very big for them. The other guy that I was going to go with another receiver, but you made such a good case for Aaron Gregory that I decided to change gears. So I'm going to go with Brandon Arrington, the 5-star defensive back. He is out of Spring Valley, California, Mount Miguel High School. Texas A&M is going to lose Bryce Anderson eventually. They're going to who's a safety, but they're going to lose Will Lee III. They're going to lose Tyreek Chappell. Des Ricks is going to be bound for the NFL, if not next year, the year after. So they're going to need to start replacing some of these guys. And they brought some talented players in. But Brandon Arrington might be the best overall athlete in this entire commitment class for Texas A&M. They're talking about the Olympics for this kid in 2028. He's incredibly fast. Some of these numbers here per 24/7 Sports. He won the Gatorade California Boys Track and Field Player of the Year as a sophomore after capturing CIF titles in the 100-meter and 200-meter dashes. He opened his junior track season up with a 10.21 100-meter dash, which is insanely fast, and then had a 20.35 in the 200-meter dash, which was a meet record for the Arcadia Invitational. Basically, this guy can run. He played both sides of the ball at Mount Miguel. He played wide receiver and corner. He had 57 passes for 527 yards and 5 touchdowns, and then 26 tackles, 3 pass breakups, and a pick on defense in just 10 games as a junior. So, and he returns punts as well, apparently. In 2023, he had a punt return for a touchdown. So, this guy kind of does everything. he's incredibly he's an incredibly talented athlete, and he's the kind of guy that Texas A&M really needs to insert into that secondary after you lose some of these, big leaders on your roster, like a Will Lee and a Tyreek Chappell and a Des Ricks, who's, talent-wise is as good as they come. He just needs to kind of put everything together on the field this year. I think he's probably going to do that, and Texas A&M is going to have one of the best corner rooms in the nation, but only briefly, because those guys are all going to be heading to the NFL here pretty soon. So, Brandon Arrington, Aaron Gregory, there's probably a couple other guys you can name in there that are going to have big impacts as well. Bryce Perry Wright is one that pops to mind. Tristan Gibbons is one that pops to mind. So that'll be something that we monitor as we, get closer to the 2026 season. But we are on 2025 right now, and we have SEC Media Days coming up. We have the start of training camp coming up here in August. We have the regular season coming up at the end of August. So there's going to be a lot to talk about on Locked On Aggies over the next few weeks. So thank you again for tuning in and making Locked On Aggies your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, please check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signing news out of college football. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel. Give me a follow over on Texas A&M Aggies on SI and on X at Matt Galatzan. And follow Harrison tell them where they can find you, Harrison.
On Twitter at Harrison Reno and over at Texas Aggies on SI.
Yeah, and go give Harrison a follow. He does some kick-ass work for us over there at Texas A&M Aggies on SI, and he did a kick-ass job today on the pod too. So we thank him for joining, and he's going to be a guest of ours next week as well and going forward. So, like I said, like and subscribe to our channel, give us a follow, and we will catch you next time.